increasing efficiency and decreasing wait time for our patients.
In the Venice clinic.
Correct.
Specifically.
Yes. So outline. Currently, what we're facing is that we're unable to seat our patients on time in Venice Clinic, partly due to having our materials that we need to gather, and then inability to be efficient because we need to have everything gathered in one place, and it's not always fully stocked for us to be able to do that. So our aim was to improve patient care by servicing our patients in a more efficient and timely manner. This would allow our residents and the assistants to focus on other tasks. Our SMART goal was to have this implemented, and by February 4th, our goal was to make sure that our seating time is 5 minutes into the patient's arrival time into the second lobby at Venice Clinic. And I'll get to the second lobby in a minute. How are we going to do this? We're going to do this by having all the supplies readily available and set up before the appointment time, and have it all in a central location so that it can be easily restocked and available to our residents. So looking at what we needed to address, our root cause analysis, we can look at the equipment. Basically, one of the things that's really important that we're having kind of a bottleneck experience is in the equipment section. So we're limited in the number of basic cassettes that we have. As far as materials, some of the materials are stored in areas that are not accessible to residents, and within the operatories, they're not always fully stocked. Then going on to our methods, currently the sterilization is in a outside facility, not within our clinic, so that takes a minute. And then we have 2 waiting rooms, one in the front of the clinic and another one right in front of our immediate patient care area.
Is the sterilization situation temporary?
It's temporary, yeah, because there's renovation, and so we have a. And then as far as the process, there's always breaks that the assistants have and lunches at random times of the day that we never know when they're going to come up. As far as people, we have rotating residents, so it's always a little bit of a change, and we always come into kind of a surprise situation, and then limited number of assistants. Okay.
So here was our process map. We went over pretty much all of the problems. So what were our protocols and what's the process to improve it? So obviously in the mornings the assistants would have to retrieve the basic kits from sterilization, and throughout the day they would also have to deliver basic kits to sterilization to make sure that we have enough, since there is a limited quantity, which is only 13 basic sets at Venice. So those are 2 key components that have to occur throughout the day for us to be effective in our plan. Also, at the end of the day, we would be relying on the assistants to restock the master supply cart, but also residents would share that responsibility with them in restocking and making sure that we're ready to go for the next day. And also residents would be responsible throughout the day for gathering materials from our master supply cart that we've created to make sure that appointments can be set up for more efficiently. So our failure modes and effect analysis is basically 3 key processes that we came up with that have to occur for our process to be successful. The first one is replenishing the supplies in the master cart, which is a shared responsibility of the assistants and the residents. There's potential failures, and that would be just if people forget, or negligence, or if an assistant is sick or has to leave early, because that's something that we had put to happen at the end of the day. It makes it to where it's easy if people are trying to hurry up and get out of the clinic. That's something that can fall through the cracks. Sterilization of the basic kits, that's a huge one, especially if the assistants don't have time or they forget, or let's say they're actually assisting residents with like restorative and they don't have a chance to actually bring those basic kits out throughout the day. That's where we could have a problem. So that's where kind of time management comes in, and that actually has a risk priority number of 600 because that's a huge one. We cannot see the patients without having the basic sets ready to go. So that was our highest ranked risk priority number step. Lastly, gathering supplies prior to the start of each appointment. Basically, that would only happen if a provider forgets about our new system, but we tried to make sure when we did the process that everybody was fully aware of our trial and what we were doing. Driver diagram. So basically, our one thing that we want to happen was to have all the patients seated within 5 minutes of arrival, and that's to the second lobby, not the first lobby. And so basically, to make that happen, we would need awareness of current inefficiencies and improvement goals, making that known to not only the faculty but also the residents and the staff, and have a fully stocked supply cart before we start each day. And so we would review the new procedures and protocols at chief rounds and develop a schedule for the assistants to check and stock the drawers throughout the day, and develop a protocol where residents also understand their responsibility of double checking the cart at the end of the day. So.
Alrighty, so we applied the 4 steps of the PDSA to our project, and this is basically a summary of our initial trial, which was in December 2018. Our plan was just to make sure that we have all supplies readily available for the pre-appointment setup to just allow us or enable us to basically seat our patients within 5 minutes of arriving to the pediatric lobby. In terms of due, the night before we had basically pre-made age-specific baggies containing all the appointment supplies. And after that was done, we did a little study or eval of our trial run, and we were able to find out that it was time consuming, and we basically asked ourselves the question, who's going to be solely responsible for this task. And then our act was basically formulating a new plan that doesn't require extensive back prepping. Okay, so to go into the plan in a little bit more detail, some of the questions that we wanted to ask or ask ourselves were how many instruments or cassettes would be needed per day, how many bags are needed per day, and where would we store all of the baggies. And in terms of predictions of like how people will receive it, what do we think will happen, we kind of thought that it will be a smoother transition for Westwood residents. We might receive a little bit of a pushback from the Venice assistants, given that it kind of interrupts their schedule that they're used to, and then potential funding or budget being allocated to the purchase of new instruments. So in terms of how we did this in collecting our data, we wanted to do basically 10 minutes prior to the next appointment. The residents will collect their Ziploc bag that contain all their goodies, in addition to the login sheets, and the login sheets will be comprised of 2 pieces of data, basically the arrival within the pediatric lobby and the time that they're actually seated within the patient seat or the operatory open bay. And after the appointment, resident documents if they had to leave the operatory for anything outside of supplies such as your radiographs, such as your school notes, such as your next appointment, or a potential giveaway of a book. So like we mentioned before, we just put together age-specific baggies in terms of instruments, fluoride, whether we use fluoride foam for kiddos 1 to 3 years old, toothbrushes, and sunglasses as well, because that's something that we also run out of the queue for as well. Okay, so in terms of our study, we were able to collect items on 7 patients. And within those 7 patients, we were able to see that it was 2 out of the 7, which were more than 5 minutes in terms of getting our patients started on time, or within our projected goal. So in terms of the act, what we were able to decide was that we wanted to adapt our plan based upon our review of the data. And we understand the project was successful, but 71% is not 100%. So it also took about 30 minutes to prepare the baggies before the appointment, which is not. It was about, I think, 15 of them, because it was just allocated for a morning session. And that was us getting basically all the supplies together to get it together.
Just because we had like different ones for different age groups.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
the toothbrush was in there, everything you needed was ready to go.
And I think one thing to add on to that is we actually kind of took the extra step in looking at the schedule the day before to make sure that we had enough, so it could flow the way that we could. But as we mentioned before, it just wasn't sustainable. I know that residents have other responsibilities, and assistants do also after work hours.
So after we did that, we decided to come up with a new plan for our second PDSA. So instead, we have the same plan. The change was in the due, so instead of having the baggies, we created a master supply cart similar to what we have at Westwood, where everything was located in a central location instead of having, so if you don't know, at Venice, each cube is supposed to be stocked with all of the materials we need for each appointment. Oftentimes the basic kits are missing, or maybe like the fluoride is missing, and then you have to like run around and go to someone else's cube and grab something, kind of disrupting them. So the way we have it at Westwood, ever since we transitioned into our temporary clinic, is we have this like giant tower. So we tried to do a similar situation there. The plan was the same, except the same questions applied, but now to the cart. Where will we store the supply cart? Who will stock and replenish the supply cart? Our predictions were going to be the same, that the smoother transition for Westwood residents at Venice being that they would know where everything is located. I know that me personally, being a Westwood resident, the very few times I'm at Venice, I'm always kind of asking questions and like grabbing someone who's there frequently and just saying, hey, where's this? And I just wanted to kind of eliminate that a little bit. So this was our goal. And then we also put in the funding and budget allocated to the purchase of new instruments if needed, because that tended to be the thing that we were grabbing from other cubes the most, was the basic cassette. Okay, so our plan for collection of data, so 10 minutes prior to the next appointment, residents were supposed to go to the MasterCard and collect all of their materials, and the login sheets, which were the same ones we used for the baggies. And then the 2 logins were when the patient arrives in the lobby and then when the patient is seated. So this is the supply cart that we're talking about. So basically that's the one that's at Westwood. We kind of found this one in Costco, our supply room here, and no one was using it. So we asked like Nancy and all of them, we're like, do you guys care if we just take this to Venice? So basically we just labeled it and we brought it to Venice and we put everything that we need for an appointment in that supply cart. So you can see we have like the table barriers, we have the suction. It's kind of similar to how we have our extra section here. So I don't know if you guys know, well, I mean, residents and faculty know, but on Wednesdays and Fridays, we actually use some of the dental school chairs. So we take a little cart similar to this to the dental school clinic in order to treat our patients there. So we're doing the same kind of idea, but having it at Venice. So that's why everything is on here, all the basic kits, snap rays, the cavity wipes, everything. The idea is that you just go here, get everything before your appointment, kind of make your own baggie, and then go back to the chair. All right, so we had 2 trials with this new system. One was February 14th, one was on February 13th. So we had the R1, R2, R3 are the different residents that were at Venice. There's fewer residents there, so we only had 3 residents participate per day during each cycle. So depending on how many appointments patients they saw per day, we calculated their time seated, and then if they had to leave the operatory to get something, and if so, what was it that they had to go get. You can see sometimes they were not able to get the Prophy cup, the Prophy paste, or they had to get up to get those things, but most of the time it was a basic kit, so that's why they're all in red. That tended to be the limiting reagent to starting patients on time. So we gave a survey at the end of like all 3 of our different cycles. We give surveys to the residents as well as to the staff. So our survey for the residents basically said, do you think this has helped to decrease your setup time? On average, how long did it take you to see your patient? Did you have to leave the operatory for any supplies? And yes, no, if so, what was it? Did you think it was useful? And then the questions for the staff members, because they would tend to hold the majority of the responsibility as far as filling the carts, we made it a little bit longer. And I'll just show you the results because instead of reading through it like this. Okay, so the survey responses for residents. So resident 1, for the first question, do you think it has helped to decrease your setup time? They said yes, maybe about 2 minutes. Second resident said yes, it took them less than 5 minutes to seat their patient on time. The second question, did they have to leave the operatory? Resident 1 and 2 said no. 3, did you think this was useful? They said yes. And then if a lot of people didn't fill out the whole rest of the survey. I mean, it's an extra task to do, so we didn't get that many responses to the it's, the yes, then why, but no one really answered those.
But did you find the location convenient? Most people said yes. So where we put it specifically is where we take radiographs in Venice. So it's in kind of an area that's outside, not interrupting where we are working with patients specifically, but it was just an area that's unused. So our staff responses. So there are only 2 assistants there. I know it was a little difficult to get the responses from them and to have them fill this out too. But their responses are pretty interesting. They're pretty much neutral on a lot of things. Or they strongly disagreed, or they would just want everything to stay in the room.
Strongly disagree.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what we predicted.
We predicted it though, yeah.
I can't apologize for that.
Yeah, so they did find that it was useful. Some of them had to remember where it was located. And then we asked them, because since they could be the ones to restock it, we're like, what days would you prefer to have this task be done? And it wasn't the same day for both of them. So one wanted Thursday, one wanted Monday. So it makes it a little difficult, because if they don't agree on a day to do the task, then that might pose a challenge. So at the end of the second PDSA, in our trial, we were effective in seeing patients within 5 minutes about 50% of the time. Our original goal was 90% of the time, so not quite there. 35% of the appointment start times were delayed due to lacking of a basic kit. So when we looked back and saw what was missing and why the appointments were delayed, it was because of the basic kits. Again, there's only 13. If there's 4 residents working on a day and they have like recalls all day, that's 4 times like 4 patients in the morning, or 3 to 4 patients in the morning per resident. That's like, assuming everyone has patients, then they need to be taken to the sterilization at lunchtime in order to be used again in the afternoon, and that's not always the case. So our solution after doing these trials was to abandon the change based on feedback from the residents and the assistants. We realized that the basic kits were the limiting reagent. It was more important than the location of all the other supplies. Some people actually preferred to just have the things in the cubes themselves. They didn't like going to the master supply cart. It also depends, because some days things were just perfectly stocked, which is great, but the main thing that was missing was the basic kits. So after talking to everyone, they seemed that this is kind of too big of a change to implement and not as effective as they would have liked. Yeah. So one way we thought we could be more efficient is if we purchase some additional basic kits, since we only have 13 and a lot of time is lost trying to sterilize the few that we have, with our 2 assistants. And one thing I know, I'm not at Venice often, but I did speak with the Venice residents. On Wednesdays, I think there's only 1 assistant per day, the whole day, so only 1 restorative appointment can be done each hour, and that assistant, because they're so busy doing that, then these tasks of going to get the sterilization and stocking is all on the resident. So that's just another thing to throw in there. Yeah.
So perhaps we could get some more basic kits.
Actually, she asked me, I don't know, 2 months ago, 1 month ago.
Oh, yeah,
I
when
said, yes,
yeah.
please do it. And today I asked Olga, have you purchased? No, they haven't.
Well, now we have
I
to
approve. 2 months ago, when you're doing your study, I approve.
Okay. Yeah. That was the main thing, is the basic kits.
But very
so.
good.
Yeah.
Thanks
We're
for
done.
trying different things. It didn't work. Let's do it again.
Cool. Any questions?
But one thing that, regarding Venice, one thing that we definitely need to make it work, we are going to purchase those kits. It's a done deal now. We don't need to talk about it. But we need to make sure that each operator is supplied, stocked, and this is not your responsibility, it's theirs responsibility. And I said many times, I need to know if things are not happening, I need to know in writing. Because But we need to make things more efficient for all of you.
Can I make a comment on this? I think one of the problems or challenges that you guys had was that you were implementing something you decided to do. And as we know, over there, you might have had a better result if you had buy-in from the assistants to start with. Somehow had them in the mix to make the plan. I don't know how that would have happened, but in general, they're very resistant to participate. So maybe they were not fully on board, because I was watching and you guys were running around trying to get this one thing happening.
I think it was also residents didn't like it too much either, too, which I understand. I think it was just.
I would say that I really disliked it.
Yeah.
For example, mine was the only cube that was completely empty, because there's one cube that goes left-handed. I'm the only left-handed one. Otherwise, the air leaked, and it was very inconvenient. Like if I dropped the prophy paste or the kid like flicked off the suction, I would have to like get up. I'd have to go over, get a new prophy paste, bring it back, instead of just being able to turn around behind me and blow it out. But the basics are often missing. Like you have to get up what they're saying, but it was really inconvenient to have to like, if something fell on the floor, you were like, I used to be able to just turn around, but now I have to go run around.
So we need to reinforce that, Doctor, before you were there more often than I am. We need to reinforce that those cards are stocked. Yes.
I can mention it. I can definitely mention it. But,
I said Peter.
But maybe we can. I'm so sorry. Maybe we can check the rooms in the morning before we start.
Yeah.
That's one thing we could do, and then point it out. You know,
Yeah,
like
I think
room number 1 or 2 is going to need some attention.
I think sometimes they'll see like 3 or 4 fluorides in there, so they'll think, I don't have to restock that, but it's like, by the midday, that's empty. And so it's like those little things, like, it might be there in the morning, but midday it's not gonna be there because the amount.
And also residents could check it in the morning when we first get there and make sure it's all stocked too. I mean, there are only 2 of them. So.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't mind, but I also don't know where that supplies is because they don't let us have that.
Yeah, they don't want us. Yeah, there's
they
like a
don't close
closet
it.
where like they don't like if we. It has a lock, but sometimes it's open. But if they see you go in there, they're like, "What are you looking for?" And you're like, "Ah, no!" Like I just need this. You're not allowed in there either. You guys. No one's allowed in there.
I mean, you're not allowed.
The closet with all the
You're not
supplies.
allowed to go in there.
They would rather if you ask them for it, but they're not always.
Give me a
I
break.
always go in there.
I always go in there. I
just
thought
go
we're
in.
talking about somewhere else.
Anyway.
Maybe it's because we're not there often, so they don't. They think we'll mess it
You guys
up.
have class at 1:30.
Yeah.
So,
One comment, and it goes along